Hello everyone, welcome to Liberable. Today is quite an exciting day for me specifically because in this review we're taking it back to where it all began. We are in Hyundai's brand new iteration of the ever popular i20. So this i20 comes in at 275,000 Rand for the base model. We're in almost the top spec today, just minus the automatic transmission. And this model comes in at 335,000 Rand. So you basically, for that, you get the two-tone option. It's the manual, and then it's the top of the range engine. So speaking about engines in this car, the lineup starts with the old 1.2 that we've seen in the Grand, we've seen in a couple of other Hyundai models. Then the standard 1.4 that has always been in the i20 that we know and love. And then last but not least, they've introduced a turbo version of a 1-liter engine. And that's the engine that is in this car today. And that kicks out 90 kilowatts and 172 Newton meters of torque. So this makes almost the same power as my old i20 made back in the day. I had the 1.6. And if you'll bear with me for 2 minutes, I just want to hop down a nostalgia train quickly. I had a red i20 just like this one. And it was the 1.6. It wasn't quite the, back in the day you got the remix version, which was the one with the rims and the upgraded sound system and the this and that. Basically, I took the standard i20 and it wasn't even mine. You need to understand this. My dad worked in Joburg and it was his car, but because he wasn't here, he said, Alex, you can have the use of the i20 while I'm away. It's not yours, let me make that clear, son, but you can have the use of it. But in my friend circle, it was mine. I just kept calling it mine. I manifested it. And then it became mine because one week he disappeared off to Joburg and I thought it was the brightest idea to take this thing to Midas and Janjira and basically kit it out. I got a Cooper lip put on the front of the car. I plasti-dipped the rear tail lights myself. I plasti-dipped all the badges around the car, the mirror caps. I even sprayed the rims, which were hubcaps. They weren't actual rims. And I made this thing look pretty wacky. It definitely stood out. I mean, you guys let me know what you think. You can either love it or you can just roast my ride. I don't really mind because it's my heritage and that's what actually got me into motoring in the first place. A bit of an odd one because most people who get into motoring and start loving cars, it's because of some sort of sports car or iconic car. And for me, that was an i20, as weird as it sounds. But anyway, this car had interior LED lights in the footwells, in the boot, in the cluster display. It even had lights in the engine bay and in the bonnet and underneath the car. This thing was literally straight out of Tokyo Drift. It was madness. My dad hated it so much when he got back from Joburg. He just said, you know what? Take it. So what is the brand new i20 like to drive? So as I got into this car, I already found a couple of similarities between this i20 and the one I owned. Namely the gears, they feel very similar. Obviously this one has a 6-speed and that means on the highways you benefit from lower revs and then ultimately better fuel consumption. So they've definitely improved a little bit there. I actually had a bit of a giggle because Niaz had to point it out to me. The first and second in this car is a little bit like notchy or sticky. When you pull it out of first into second, there's a little bit of a and he had to point this out. For me it was completely normal because I'd already adjusted straight into this car because of that familiarity. But I think it is worth mentioning, and he brought it up and I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Then when I got back in the car, it's like, oh, that was exactly like Mary. Mary's the name of my old i20, by the way. The next thing I notice is the ease of drive, and this is something I loved about the old i20, and this is something that has remained, if not gotten better. It's just an easy car to operate, and I can see why places like Avis and all the other fleets around the world with rental cars choose things like this, because you get in, and I'm not talking like an ergonomics point of view like Volvo and Audi do with the notches on everything, but I'm talking like ease of use, where you find everything. You get in this car and you already know where all the buttons are, and you know what things do. You don't have to be a Hyundai expert. Then the next thing is the driving in terms of like how it feels on the road. And I think that they have come quite a long way in terms of the dampening. I remember the old i20, although having quite soft suspension, was still a bit like rickety. It had this reverberating feeling on the road. When you go over a bump, you felt like a double bounce, which you didn't feel in many other cars. But this, they definitely sorted it out. It seems to iron out the bumps, and although it is an affordable car, in inverted commas, you don't really feel like you're in one, if that makes sense. Okay, so it's quite wet now, and we are tossing this around corners, although quite responsibly. We're not breaking any laws and we're not being too silly. But this car definitely has the same problem that all front-wheel drive cars have. We don't even need to talk about it. It does understeer quite a lot. But one thing I do appreciate is the fact that it warns you. There's no sort of like snap on you and then the front washes out. It kind of, you're not going to hear it today, but the tires start squealing. It's quite progressive. You don't feel like you're on the edge of traction and then it's gone. It warns you, and it's quite predictable in a sense. It was actually quite a good first car for me to have because of that, because it taught me where the limits were. And it wasn't a race car, so you couldn't actually get to a dangerous speed too quickly. You had to work for your speed and nurse it through corners, that sort of thing. Believe it or not, that i20 actually saw a couple of robot-to-robot events as well as track days at Killarney. So it was the only i20 there, but hey. Sheesh! It's still got that kick into second. If you shift quick enough, you get a little bit of a slip into second gear. I love that. Obviously I drive a TDI now, and we've got like 9 million Newton meters of torque, so I mean, you slip in any gear, but this takes it back to where it began for me, so it's all quite nostalgic actually. So I think I've already made my mind up. I've driven the i10 with the 1.2, I've driven an i20 with a 1.4 before, and I obviously drove my 1.6, which made similar power figures, a little bit more than this actually. And I definitely think that if I had to buy an i20 again today, the pick of the bunch for me would be this 6-speed manual gearbox and this 1-liter turbo. I mean, longevity wise, we don't know too much about this engine. It has to be said that smaller engines that run on higher parameters and higher compression and blah, 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 tend to have a shorter lifespan, but maybe not. Maybe this engine proves to last a lifetime. And I know that the 1.2 and the 1.4 platforms that Hyundai have made have actually proven themselves, and they have been around for plus 10 years. So, I mean, there's that to consider. If you are going to get one of these and you want a reliable engine that you know is going to last, then maybe 1.2, 1.4 is your game. But if you're after a more peppy engine, a more responsive engine, and I dare say quite a fun little 1-liter unit, then this could be your one. Shoo! This 1 liter is quite potent, hey? So let's talk about the boring stuff, the nitty-gritty, everyday economy. So I've managed to get this car as low as about 5.9 liters per 100 Ks on the highway. I wasn't driving too slowly, but it was a mix between. This was the first time I got in the car from Paarl to Cape Town. In and around the city, I've kept it under 7. It's about 6.5, 6.6, even 6.2 liters per 100 Ks is not a foreign thing to see in this car. Obviously, Hyundai claim that the 1.2 liter is the most efficient engine model in this lineup. So if that's all you're after, fuel economy, then choose the 1.2. In and around city streets, I've brought this car to Newlands now, just so we can go over some speed bumps and some narrow roads. This guy in the back is trying to kill me, just hold on. So over speed bumps, it's quite smooth. As I said earlier, it dampens well, so It's generally quite comfortable for a car of this size and cost. You're indicating right to go left. That's confusing. So in terms of the gear shifting, this car is actually quite pleasing to change gears, especially when you're just hopping around town and not really putting it through its paces. It's just kind of like this, from second to third, click into place. From third to fourth, click into place. And it's quite notchy. You get a definite confirmation that you've got into gear, and in a way it's quite rewarding. There isn't any weight on the gear shifter though, so it's not really a sports shifter, but yeah, it's an i20. It's familiar. Exterior styling on the Hyundai, and this is where everybody seems to be quite divided. I mean, we ran a poll on Instagram and people got quite emotional, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know that an i20 would do this to you guys, but it seemed to get heated. Anyway, if you look at this car from any angle, it's completely different to the old departing i20. If you look at this from the side, I think that this is where it looks pretty good. The lines, the creases, the folds, the angles, it looks pretty cool. And if you look at these rims as well, these are actually part of the Fluid package, which is slightly higher than the Motion package. If you opt for the Motion i20, what you get is 15-inch steelies. On this car, you get 16-inch alloys. Now, these look cool, sure, but the only issue is 16-inch isn't a very practical rim in South Africa. I have 16s on my Polo, and the struggle to find Michelin PS4s or PS3s is real. And when you do find them, they triple the price of a 17-inch tire. It's insane. Anyway, moving to the front of the car, and this is where I actually think they've done quite well. If you look at the front of the car, they've got this new black grille that kind of makes it look super sporty. It's also got a lip on it from standard, so you don't have to go and get Alex's Cupra lip from Janjira to fit your i20. It already looks cool from the front. From the bumper to the bonnet and then to the back of the bonnet, you've got this bulge that makes it look quite sporty, and I really like this as well. The only thing on the front of the car that I wish they'd done is bring in the LED projector lamps that are on the European models of the i20. Not only do LEDs create a safer driving environment at night, but they also just look way cooler. They make this car look way more upmarket. And if you are going to be fighting the Polo, then you definitely need LED DRLs, you need LED headlamps, and LED brights. Then moving on to the back of the car, and now this is where we're going to have some fun. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, because I'm not sure what I think of it. I think the back tail lights and that light bar look pretty cool. I just think that there are far too many creases and folds and lines on the back of this car, and kind of makes it look a little bit diluted. It doesn't know what it is. It's taken inspiration from far too many different places. It just looks like it is a little bit lost in what it is. Okay, so i20 interior. First things first, we got a new steering wheel, which is pretty cool. It's got red stitching on the inside. It's quite thick and bulgy, and ergonomically, it's pretty much there. It's got quite a lot of different options depending on how you like to hold the steering wheel. Steering is also height and reach adjustable, and it's quite a generous amount of adjustability that they've given us here. And then it's got all the buttons that you would need to control your multimedia, voice control, and then cruise control on the right hand side. Okay, let's switch on the ignition and see what we got going on here. Okay, so that's new. They've got this new kind of faux digital cluster that sort of looks like what BMW have done, but it retains its originality, I think. This isn't actually full on digital. It's a lighting element behind a print of the revs and the speedo. I like it. I think it's original, and it definitely adds something to this car. It makes it feel slightly more special, because then when you move on to the rest of the dash, it's, yeah, everything is plastic. Absolutely everything. But on the topic of interior styling, we need to talk about the fact that there are some cues that we've seen in the i10 Grand before. We've got these inlays in the doors and a couple of other places, also rear doors and over here, where it kind of matches the paint on the outside of the car. Then if you move down here to where the speakers are, you've got this kind of like flowy look with all these lines, and it kind of mirrors what's happening on the front of the dash here. And I don't know what they were aiming for, but it kind of looks like they tried to make this cabin as aerodynamic as possible. I don't know if that's to help the aircon flow better inside the car, but anyway, it looks pretty cool. It's not for everybody, but you guys can let me know what you think about this in the comments. No climate control, normal aircon, so you're going to have to turn the dial yourself and adjust how hard you want it to blow the cold air or hot air at you. Big problem, I know. Then up here, the infotainment system. Europe gets quite a big touchscreen. We get a smaller touchscreen with hotkey buttons on the sides. You've got radio, media, track, setup, seek, whatever you want, and a power button, which is quite nice because it doubles up as a volume knob. I hate this transition towards touchscreen volume changing. I can never get it right. I always go to turn it up and it turns it down. So I'm grateful that they've retained this at least. This unit actually comes with wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Then down here we've got two USB sockets. The one is a USB to connect for, I think, Android Auto, and then on the other side it's just a charger. And then under here it's kind of like a party pack, because when you look at the shape of the flap, you're like, what could be under there? It's just a normal charging socket. Underneath that though, there's a wireless charger. Like, I've driven 500, 600,000, a million rand cars that don't have a wireless charger. And this 335,000 Rand Hyundai has a wireless charger. Then in terms of media, sound system's actually not bad for a car that costs this much. The only issue is though that everything is plastic, so the door panels do rattle and there isn't too much dampening to take care of that. Then at nighttime, this car actually has a little bit of a party piece. You switch it on, you start driving, and then you notice that in the door inlays over here and in the door bins at the bottom, where you've got a cup holder and more storage on the side, there's actually mood lighting, which definitely makes this car feel a little bit more funkier. I think it'll definitely help the appeal to a younger generation. And Hyundai said at the launch of this car that they wanted to use this model to really take the fight to the Polo. And the Polo is a people's car, as we know, and a lot of young people drive this car. And if you want to fight that market and you want to take a little bit from that, then you definitely need to make it appeal to younger people. And I think that's what they've tried to do here. Then in terms of the back of the car, it is pretty much what the i20 stands for, is practicality, small hatchback. Legroom is okay. Headroom is okay. This is the first time I've actually been in a B-class hatchback model and not had to complain about my head being squashed at a 90-degree angle because of the sloped roofline that they've had to create for the design of the car. The rear center seat also benefits from the fact that you've got quite a low floor line. So if you do have to take a fifth passenger in the back, they're not going to be complaining too much about their legroom. Then in the back, you've also got a standard USB charging socket, as well as two aircon controls. You can either close or open them, and then obviously change the direction. If you compare this to the Polo and the Fiesta, this actually has the biggest boot. Not by a big margin though. The Polo has 351 and this car has 352, so it's actually pretty negligible. In the boot, you also get a storage net to hold all the loose objects down. Now, I wish that this was present in my 2010 Hyundai, because it would have saved my laptop. It would have saved my university notes from getting destroyed, because I left my laptop in the back and I decided to go have some fun one day, and my laptop just shook itself loose in the boot and destroyed it. So it was a good lesson learned, but also I'm happy they've got one of these nets, because that will mean that it won't happen again. And then we have to tread quite lightly here, because although the i20 has grown up a lot in terms of features and looks, it's also grown up quite a lot in price. And when my dad got his i20 back in the day, which was mine, he only paid under 200 grand for this thing. And granted, it was a demo model. You have to take inflation into account. But this thing is no longer cheap, but it also has a lot of features. Now, one thing I liked in the previous i20 is that unlike other B segment hatchbacks, you could control all the windows from the front. Everything was kind of centralized. You had a window locking here, your central locking, and you could electronically control your mirrors, and the mirrors also automatically folded. Now, features like that make the i20 what it is, a value-filled proposition at an affordable price. Now, that being said, we have to look at how much the Polo costs. Now, I did a little bit of digging, and from what I could see is the Polo actually starts from slightly more expensive, whereas this one starts from about 275. The Polo comes in at about 290 and then ends at about 390 with the R line before you start touching the GTI territory. But according to the poll we ran, they think that the i20 is also quite expensive. So the Polo feels like it's got quite a little bit more tech in it to satisfy our inner geek. Then you compare it to the i20, which has got a very comprehensive warranty, very comprehensive service plan. At the end of the day, you just need to decide what you're buying the car for. Are you buying it for driving pleasure and tech fest and comfort, or are you buying a car for ownership, longevity, practicality? Anyway guys, that is my take on Hyundai's new i20. If you did enjoy the video, please do leave a thumbs up. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and also share the video with your friends and family. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you are new around here. Otherwise, be free, be you, Liberable out.